To create this air dry clay, we will only need a few supplies and materials found at your home. We will need cornstarch, white glue, white vinegar, lotion, and baby oil. You will need about a cup and a half of cornstarch first. I used a half a cup measuring cup and added 3 half cups of cornstarch to a large bowl. Make sure your bowl is nice and large because mixing it's going to get messy. The larger the bowl, the more likely the mess will be contained inside of the bowl. Make sure you get all that cornstarch out. It is nice to have a little bit of cornstarch on your hands because that will help everything not stick later. After the cornstarch, you're going to want to add a cup of white school glue. I used a half a cup measuring cup and filled it up twice and added it right into my cornstarch mixture. I'm going to take my spatula to make sure I get all of that glue out of there so that I can use it for my clay. Once you have your cornstarch and your glue in your large mixing bowl, go ahead and mix those together first. Make sure that you're holding on to the bowl tight because that cornstarch is going to want to go everywhere and that is going to have a little bit of resistance. So make sure you hold tightly with one hand and mix well with the other. It does not have to be perfectly mixed by this point, but you do want to really start getting those components all together. Make sure to continuously scrape the sides and edges of your bowl with your spatula to get all of that glue and extra cornstarch back into your clay mixture. You're going to want to resist using your hands during this step. Since this is only cornstarch and glue, it's really sticky and it will get all over your hands and you could end up losing a lot of your clay mixture by washing it or scraping it off of your hands. So please try to resist using your hands at this point and only use the spatula to mix your clay. Once that mixture is pretty well combined, you're going to want to add in your last remaining ingredients. 1 tablespoon of vinegar, 1 tablespoon of baby oil, and 1 teaspoon of lotion. When adding in that lotion, you can use any kind. You can use thicker hand cream like what I used. You can use a pump, but I believe white lotion, if you can, is easier than any that has dye or fragrance that could affect the color of your clay. Once you have all of those items mixed into your large mixing bowl, continue to mix. You're going to want to mix for a while, and again, you're really going to want to resist adding your hands in there until it's getting a little bit more like clay. Right now it's still going to be very sticky and you could lose a lot of your clay when you're washing your hands or scraping anything off. So mix, mix, mix. After those ingredients are well combined, you will notice that your clay is still pretty liquidy. You're going to want to go ahead and get that cornstarch back out, and you're going to want to coat your hands And you're going to want to just take a pinch at a time and add a little bit more cornstarch into that mixture. You'll notice that the cornstarch will allow your clay to be less like a blob and more in one solid structure, and it will also help it be less sticky. Again, still try not to touch your clay quite yet, but you can start to get your hands kind of prepared and ready with that cornstarch. Add a little bit, mix, add a little bit more, mix. You can always add more, but you cannot take it away. So add a little bit at a time until you start to get the desired consistency. You'll notice I'm adding a little bit, but I am adding it pretty often. You'll notice my clay is starting to become one little ball. It's still not quite the texture that I need it to be, so I'm going to add a little bit more cornstarch. Now is the time where you might start to need to use your hands just a little bit because it is getting a lot thicker. I'm going to use my hands a little bit. Again, I have cornstarch on them now to kind of help keep it off of my hands, otherwise I could waste a lot of my clay by just washing my hands and scraping it all off. I'm going to continue to mix it. Now I'm getting to the point in my clay where I'm really going to want to start to touch it. I'm going to kind of pinch it and touch it and see how sticky it is. You notice that when I touched it a minute ago, it wasn't very sticky. It wasn't sticking to my fingers, but it did still have a little tacky texture. I'm going to continue to feel it, but at this point I'm going to be starting to get ready to take it out of the bowl. At this point I'm going to make sure that my hands are pretty well coated with that cornstarch so it really doesn't stick to my hands as much as it could. I'm going to go ahead and start to scrape it out of the bowl and onto the wax paper and onto my hands. You're going to want to just play with it for a while, which is different than normal clay because normal clay can dry out quickly by messing with it. However, with this air dry clay you really want to play with it for a while. So play with it for a while, add some cornstarch, and just mix it. Mix it, mix it, mix it. Mine is still very, very sticky. I'm going to use some of the cornstarch around the bowl, but I am going to add some more cornstarch to my clay. This is really where the messiness and the stickiness and the fun of this project comes into play. It's all over my hands, there's nothing I can really do, but what I am going to do is I'm just going to play around and mix and knead the clay in that mixing bowl. I'm going to hold the mixing bowl tightly with one hand and just play with it in another. I'm going to add a little bit more cornstarch to it, but I'm also really going to take advantage of the cornstarch that's around my bowl and try to mix that in as well. This recipe does not make a lot of clay, so do try to keep as much of the clay that you make in with your final product. So see how I'm scraping it off my hands now? I really want to be able to save that clay for projects later on. I don't want to be able to throw that away or have that go down the drain of my sink. My clay is finally ready for me to really take it out and just have fun with it. Just play with it, knead it. I'm going to start to add some more cornstarch to it, and I'm really going to be mindful about the areas particularly that are really sticky, and I'm going to start to add cornstarch even into those spots. Take all of that clay that you've made and really add it together. Once the majority of your clay is out of your bowl, you're going to want to take that wax paper and you're going to want to start to knead it. Just like when you're making sugar cookies or anything that you don't want to stick to the wax paper, go ahead and put a fair amount of cornstarch down so that it does not stick to the wax paper. Rather, you just add that extra cornstarch in. And I'm really just going to start to knead it, mess around with it, play with it. Again, there's still a lot on my hands. I am very messy, but that is okay. I'm going to just slowly start to take that clay off of my hands and really start to add it to the main part of my clay. The kneading technique of folding the clay in on itself, just like I'm doing here, is really helpful. See how you can already see that my clay is really starting to become smooth and silky in one piece. I'm going to slowly take some more of that clay that's on my hands and add it to my more silky clay. I'm adding a little bit more cornstarch to those spots that are really sticky, and I'm going to continue to knead. Notice here, the cleaner part of my hand really is not sticking to the clay anymore, and that's great news. We're really making progress. At this point in the process, I am going to pause for a minute and wash my hands. I'm going to go ahead and fill my hands back up with some cornstarch, but now this clay is going to get a lot less messy at this point. It's already in one blob, and I'm really just going to knead it and play with it. The warmth of your hands and playing with it actually warms it up and does not dry it out. So just play with it, have fun with it, feel the texture, and any particularly sticky spots, add some cornstarch. Play around with it and have fun. The kneading process is very important. I'm only going to be kneading with one hand so that my other hand keeps the wax paper steady. However, if you do have masking tape, you can tape down the wax paper to whatever surface you're working on, so you do not need to hold it down with one hand. I'm still adding a little bit of cornstarch, depending on how sticky my clay is, but if you'll notice, it's really not sticking to my hands like it used to. Since this clay is air dry clay, it does not get dry until it's exposed to air for an extended period of time, which means it's really important to keep it wrapped and safe until we do want it to dry out forever. The best way to keep it from drying out is just covering it and wrapping it with saran wrap. I'm going to completely cover it in saran wrap so that there's no exposing or vulnerable spots in my clay. Wrap it up and wrap it up tightly. Once it is all in the saran wrap, it is good to go for tomorrow for our projects.